Hi, Andrea. Can you hear me, Andrea?
No, but that's obviously my settings. Okay, I can hear you. Can you hear me clearly?
I can. Hi, Andrea. Hi, Glisali. I can see you there. Laurie and Dan, welcome. We'll be kicking off momentarily.
Morning.
Morning. And morning, everyone else who's joined us. We'll be kicking off, as I said, just momentarily. We'll just give it another minute or two and we're ready to go.
Excellent. Good morning, Mick. Haven't seen you in a while.
Morning, Andrea.
How's things down in Colac?
It's cold, so it shouldn't be too bad working in the cold. Should be worth listening to.
Yeah, maybe your fridges don't need us. You don't need your fridges so much at these days.
Correct.
You can just put the ice cream outside. Okay, Gary, we're at 10 o'clock if you're ready for us to start.
I am indeed, Andrea. Let's get underway, shall we?
Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our June webinar. Today is Friday, the 10th of June. My name is Andrea Rowe. I'm the General Manager of Safety Action, and talking to you this morning is Gary Rowe as well. And we'll be taking you through some of the top topics in our most recent June safety newsletter, which you can find a copy of on our website if you don't already receive that directly to your email. And on the screen, you'll see the topics we're going to take you through today. Now, firstly, I would like to introduce you to a couple of our new team members. We have them also online, so you might see them there. We have Jessica Carrigo, who's joining our administration team. Welcome, Jessica. And we have Andre, who's joining us as a new WHS consultant. So again, we've got Andre online. Welcome, Andre. We're really pleased to have you on our team. And so for those of you watching, if you do work with us in the near future, you may come across our new team members, and I hope you enjoy working with them as well. Now I'm going to hand over to Gary, who's going to talk to you about working in the cold.
Thanks very much, Andrea, and welcome once again, everyone, and thanks for joining us. Yeah, working in the cold is a topical one. Obviously, we've come into winter, and particularly a cold start in Melbourne. Today, rather than just talk to the slide that you've got in front of you, there's a couple of aspects, I think, to working in the cold. One is what people would understand outdoors, working in the cold, and that might also be in, say, a cool store. It could even be very cold warehouses and related areas, but it could also be we're in the office or we're indoors, and so many of your staff may say, gee, I'm pretty cold here in the office. What temperature does the safety laws say that we should be maintaining for example, in office environments or other indoor areas? So let's tackle each of the bits first off, if I may. So many circumstances, as you know, require employees to work in cold conditions. I've mentioned cool stores, industrial freezers. It could be outdoors road construction. We see them standing out there, the flag people standing outside with the flags. We've got a number of our good friends and clients working in, oops, there we go. Not sure where my slides have gone there. Bear with me. I'll just try and get that back. I think Andrea may have captured my slide. I'm not sure. That's okay. We'll just get that back online in a moment. So it'll join us in a moment. The slides. Yep. There we go. Upload, copy, replace. There we go. Okay, it's coming in. So some of our friends even work in alpine areas, and So they're talking about up in the snow line and somewhat extreme conditions. So let's have a look. One of the things that we find is that the first thing, if you have people working, let's start with the outdoors, and I'll come to the indoors in a moment, or in physical freezer conditions, cool stores, etc., possibly warehouses. Number one, have a documented risk assessment. Simply consider what work areas where people are working in the cold, and for a rule of thumb, if the temperature is less than 15 degrees, it's considered working in the cold. And obviously, if you're working below zero, like alpine areas, snow and freezers, are even more important. Now, if somebody needs to only go in for 2 minutes, 1 minute to look inside a freezer, yes, that's cold, but it's probably not working in the cold. So working in those temperatures below 15 degrees, particularly where it's even going lower in freezers in less than zero, for longer periods, so more than just a minute or two, you are now working not in cold conditions, but for a reasonable longer period of time. We recommend a risk assessment. So if you haven't got it, you can contact our office, either email or call. We have a fact sheet which includes a nice little risk assessment, and I'll just mention the key components that we've got in the risk assessment that might help you. And it's got red, yellow, green. So first it says, what is the temperature of the environment? So if it's above 15 degrees, it's in green. If it's between 0 and 15, it's in the yellow zone. Below 0, red. So it doesn't mean to say you can't do it below 0. It just means you're up in the alpine area or in a freezer, and we're going to need control. So let's do the risk assessment first. What are the wind conditions? So if it's outdoors, there may well be strong wind, mild or no wind. In a freezer, you're not going to have that necessarily. Outside, wind or rain, and you've got green, okay, no rain, damp, yellow, raining in the red condition. Nature of the work, it could be sedentary. So now it's in the red if it's sedentary and it's cold. If you're doing mild or heavy physical work, might move back into yellow or green. And the other one is, what personal protective equipment do these people have? This is standard issued equipment. So if we're in normal clothes, we're in the red zone. Warm winter clothing, yellow. And if we've got special clothing for working in the cold, special PPE, in the green. So I just thought I'd show you that's the general work conditions, which is in the risk assessment we've got. And then there's a self-assessment. You might find this interesting. And this is not unreasonable when you're talking to your team to say, do you feel comfortable? And so, for example, if they say, I'm comfortable, they're in the green, working with whatever those conditions we explain. I'm a little bit uncomfortable is yellow, and I'm very uncomfortable, I'm in the red. And so I like to think that if my team tell me they are uncomfortable, I, as a manager of this business, I need to act. I want my team to be comfortable and efficient. And I think you want your team to be as well. So you might need to find something else we can or should be doing. You may consider reaction time, problem solving, dexterity, and people will tell you whether they're affected by that. So there's a quick risk assessment and a fact sheet that we've got that supports our topic today on working in the cold. Our newsletter already tells you broadly some of the circumstances and issues. I thought, though, this morning I'd also turn to, which is not necessarily in our article, but part of it is working inside. So number one, we know that because it's cold weather, either at work or at home, people are turning on more heaters, and there's more, the data shows a greater risk of fires emanating in houses and workplaces. In the workplaces, it might, and at home, it could be because somebody's tipped over a portable heater. And if it doesn't have the safety devices like an auto cutout, so older style electric heaters don't have the auto cutout when they're tipped over. And clearly, we'll want to ban them. And I'm going to move into some policies around here in the moment. If it's gas heating, which could also be in the workplace as well as at home, so you could have portable LP gas heaters, which are not desirable. We've got flammable gases in the workplace. We've got flames. We've got heat. But if you've got extreme cold and that's how you deal with it, we get that. But make sure that as you kick off the winter, that they've been inspected, that they're safe, they can't easily be tipped over, they're not near combustible materials, etc. But if you can, through design, consider, can we have better hardwired installed infrared overhead that are providing warmth in workshops, warehouses, particularly where people are standing to perform regular work and tasks. So consider those things as well. If people are in warehouses, cold surfaces, so consider things like insulated mats, particularly where, once again, people are working for a period of time. Inside other office areas, consider carpeting or something to improve insulation and warmth. So let's just turn now to thermal comfort in the office. And people increasingly ask me at this time of year, what does the legislation say for the comfortable temperature indoors? So what I can tell you, it doesn't matter what state of Australia, it is not prescribed as a temperature, neither for hot nor cold. So there's no prescribed temperature. But doing a risk assessment for working in the cold that I've just explained to you, we can actually get feedback from staff. We can actually know the conditions. But what I can share with you, optimal range in an office is between 20 degrees and 26 degrees. Now that means 26 is now your upper for the hot weather. So now we're talking about sedentary work, code of practice in Victoria. So there's a compliance code, workplace amenities and work environment, which you can download from the WorkSafe Victoria site. Is a fairly lengthy code, but so it's more than just working in the cold or working in the heat temperature. So it covers all amenities, etc. And it actually references the desirable range between 20 degrees and 26 degrees. So if you haven't got a thermometer, you might want to consider getting one if people are complaining and say, so what is our temperature? And are we keeping it in that range? But you and I would know thermal comfort is not just a pure thermometer reading. So for example, if I happen to be sitting in a drafty area where a door is continually being opened, or if I'm in a warehouse and there's a roller door open and I'm getting a very cold draft coming in, even though you may say the thermometer tells me a particular temperature, I will not be comfortable. So I'm just sharing with you, thermal comfort is also considering ventilation and drafts. So the code of practice refers to 0.1 to 0.2 meters per second, as in wind speed or draft. This can be measured if you like, but you can gauge it just by knowing, can I feel a draft here? So drafts can make me feel colder, even though I may be at or close to that desirable temperature range. The other one that can make us uncomfortable is humidity. So if it's too low, then your team will report things like dry eyes, dry nose and throat. And this will be uncomfortable as well with low humidity. Obviously in summer, in the hot temperatures, we tend to have high humidity and people feel sticky and uncomfortable. But today we're more interested in the cold temperatures because this is what people are going to talk to us about. If people tell me they feel cold or they're shivering, then what we need to do is look at how can we get that temperature back into the correct range. Are we able to affect the humidity? If it's too drafty, that's ventilation and humidity in winter. So we want to minimize those drafts. So now turning to, if I may, I also find that in winter, people are tempted to bring heaters from home into the workplace. And once again, it could be a little electric bar heater, it could be a little electric fan heater or something of that nature. So the question is, one, should we allow people to have a heater under their desk? and more particularly, should they be allowed to bring one from home? So we know the employer, your business, has a legal duty of care to ensure a safe workplace, safe tools and equipment. So if they are bringing them from home and you allow that, there needs to be some process to at least assess, is it safe? Are you going to include it under your electrical test and tag and inspection regime? Or are you going to ban people bringing in equipment from home? But if you do, but you still want to allow them to have a heater, then maybe the business might need to consider there will be exceptions where we know our building air conditioning can't cope, and we might allow individual heaters. That might be the way you're going to go about it. So here's my point. What you need now, if this is an issue in your business, or it may come up, you need a company policy that talks about thermal comfort indoors. Are we going to allow heaters, and are we going to allow equipment to be brought from home, and how is that going to be controlled? So you need to consider that now. If you don't have a company policy, can I have an electric heater under my desk, and is the company going to buy it, or do I have to bring it from home? I'd suggest that you have a look at that now and bring it into your company policy. So there's some just little tips on working in the cold. Our newsletter has a little bit more information on that as well, and the 2 fact sheets that are available, working in the cold, and all, which has that risk assessment I mentioned, and also thermal comfort in offices, which is a separate fact sheet if you're interested. So before I hand back to Andrea, Andrea's asked me just to briefly touch on an article we've got in our current newsletter on dealing with non-compliance. And it came out of a case study working with another one of our good friends and clients, where a director of the business, a director of research, was asked by the board to give a sign-off on full legal compliance by the business. Now, just in case any of your executives or your board turn to you as either safety managers or safety coordinators in your business, or HR, doesn't matter, and say, I want a legal sign-off on compliance. How do you deal with this? So the first thing I'd say to you is that every business we work with, when I look at the safety policy for the business, says we will comply with all workplace safety laws, right? So here's the first point. Your policy says you will do this. So probably the board think, so there's no problem with me asking you to give me a sign off that we're actually complying with that. So following on from the policy, I think the policies are reasonable. That's got to be your goal. But it may be unreasonable for you or I or anyone else to actually sign off and give a guarantee that the entire business is legally compliant. I think what you can say is that we have policies and procedures that actually strive to and actually show that we have met our requirement of a safe system of work. So our paperwork, our documentation shows our systems are compliant. What you and I cannot guarantee is whether any individual worker in your business today, out of your eyesight, is actually following those systems 100%. We want them to, we've trained them, we periodically audit, and we might do job observations and retraining for people, but we can't guarantee it. So that's my point about when people ask for a sign off, you can sign off that we have the systems. You can sign off that our systems are matched to the requirements of, for example, legislative requirements. It could be working at heights. And so you've looked at the work at heights regulations and you've written policies and procedures and maybe developed training programs that will actually deliver compliance with those requirements. As I repeat, what you can't guarantee and should not be pressed to sign off to say every single day every person is complying with it. You would say we have systems that deliver confidence that our team know those requirements, have been trained in those requirements, and to the best of our knowledge are following it. So that was my key point out of this article. The other one, if I may, is occasionally good friends tell me, oh, but if we do a legal compliance audit or indeed a safety audit, you will identify problems and that will create legal exposure for us. So you've identified, a piece of machinery is not fully guarded, or you might identify a chemical storage is deficient or is not fully bunded, for example. I just want to remind you, an audit does not create legal liability for you. You already had that. Before you were told in an audit report, the exposure already existed. So this is the first point. You need to have a healthy discussion with your execs or your management team if somebody raises that as a counterpoint. So number one, the exposure was already there. If we found something, it means it was already there before we came. That was already a problem for you. And if WorkSafe were to attend, or if an accident were to occur, that exposure was already there for you. So what the audits do is don't create that exposure. It's only your inaction in relation to a report that creates exposure. So people will not bring a safety report to court and say, there's evidence you were non-compliant. What they'll do is bring that forward and say, you were told on this date about this problem, what did you do? And so it's inaction. And then people will turn to me and say, well, I can't deal with all of them immediately. That's why you need to prioritise. Is prioritisation perfect? No. Priority A, priority B, priority C. You can say, I acted in good faith, I acted as quickly as I could, and I focused on the high priority items. Now, if something happens with a lower priority item, you can only do your best. And so that's, if you like, my little tips on dealing with non-compliance, legal compliance. When people press you, are we fully legally compliant, or should we do an audit? I hope I've given you a few tips how to handle those. I hope in a healthy way. So I hope that helps you. So with that, I'll hand back to Andrea. And Andrea, I think there was that question about people being stressed, and we're hearing a lot more about this at the moment, and saying, what are the employees' rights? Do you want to tell us, Andrea?
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Look, we do hear from several people, employers, and they're a little bit confused about what they can or cannot do when it comes to a worker's, mental condition. What we know is from research that most stress-based claims actually arise from issues not necessarily related to work. So they could be related to things like the employee's home life, existing emotional state, or personal circumstances. Because of this, employers are often unsure about their rights and responsibilities, about what they can or should not say. So often what this means is that the employer avoids saying anything and allowing the worker to work, which in some circumstances, this could be hazardous to the worker's physical safety in the workplace if they're mentally unfit to be working, or could increase the harm to them. Now, what we know is under the safety law, the employer's duty is clear. Under the legislation, you are required to identify hazards which could harm the person in the workplace, which includes psychosocial risks. And you need to assess the risk and put in place appropriate control measures. So if there's a genuine concern about somebody's mental state or physical state, which could impair their ability to work safely, then your responsibility is to address this. So what you should do is have a conversation with the worker, or have appropriate HR people talk to the worker openly, respectfully, and with genuine care to ask them about their well-being and if they have any issues that you can help with. Now, regardless of whether or not the worker might disclose any, mental or well-being conditions, if you still believe that the worker is not in a safe condition to work, for example, operating machinery or even driving a motor vehicle in the course of work, you may need to request that they undergo a medical examination to assess their fitness for work. Now, remember, you have the same responsibility for your workers' health, both mental and physical, and you have the right and the responsibility to ensure the worker is able to work safely and that their work will not harm them or cause further harm to existing conditions. So what this means is if you're worried that your worker is stressed or has a mental condition that could impair their ability to work, or that the work could increase harm of an existing condition, this should be treated no differently to, any suspected drug or alcohol problem or a physical injury that someone suffered in or out of work. Your responsibility is exactly the same, and you have a duty to make sure that your workers can work safely.
Thanks, Andrea. Can I ask, some people might, for example, when you approach because you're worried about them, there's something about their demeanour that you think there's a problem, whether it be driven out of the home or out of work, you don't know. And it doesn't matter because they've got to be able to work safe, as you've told us. What do you do if the worker says it's a private matter? Because you don't want to pry too deep, but we need to know enough to help them. Does that make sense? So what would you recommend then?
I would agree, Gary, that, technically, what happens in somebody's home life, it is none of your business really, but so you need to focus on what is your business, which is ensuring that they can work safely. So it's no different, I guess, if you suspected, for example, a worker might have a drug or alcohol problem, or, might not be, correctly balanced with the prescribed medication. If they had any sort of medical condition, you would be obligated to get them seen by a medical practitioner just to confirm that they are, in fact, in a good condition to work. But it's certainly a good thing to do to always look out for the mental well-being and offer support for workers for, any stress or mental concerns that you have, whether it be home. They don't have to talk to you about their concerns, but you should still ask and show genuine care for their well-being.
Thanks, Andrea. Now, only in the interest of time, unless you've got something else, I know there was an important one with the safety alert that we put out in the last couple of weeks in regard to sliding gates. Are you ready to move on to that? Would you like to talk to that?
Yes, please. Now, unfortunately, in April this year, there was a fatal accident in Victoria where a sliding gate came off its tracks, and the worker was trying to put the gate back and close the gate manually, and the gate fell onto the worker and he died. Now, this is not the first fatal accident that has been reported. We've seen many of these similar types of incidents involving sliding gates. And these accidents, basically the gate can't fall on somebody unless it comes off its tracks. So my key message to you is have a look. If you have any of these type of gates, automatic sliding gates or manually powered sliding gates, check that your gate has the features that prevents the gate from sliding off. As in, check that it has stoppers to prevent it going too far in the closed or open position where it could run off its tracks that way. And also check that it has controls to stop the gate going up and off the tracks as it is in the open or closed position. The other key message, which is in our safety bulletin, so feel free to call us or email for a copy of that, is that you need to train your workers to not to attempt to try and reposition one of these gates manually. Often they weigh over a ton. They're very, very heavy, and that's why they can cause serious injuries or death if it falls on a person. So tell your workers in no circumstances should they attempt to try and lift or manually put the gate back on its tracks on their own. Call the gate contractor and have the professionals come and fix the gate back into position.
Thanks, Andrea. And I think you mentioned there we have a fact sheet on that's got a number of technical things that people can look for, like a checklist if they like it. Thanks for that, Andrea. And I think, Andrea, you wanted to give a little reminder. I think everyone's hearing it on the news, but just from our perspective on flu shots.
Yes, so we're just sharing the government's reminder to people that it is possibly a severe flu season. So they are recommending that people do get their flu shot as soon as possible. And you might have heard in Victoria, it is now free for everybody. So you can get that without cost, even if your employer doesn't pay for it for you. So that's great news.
Okay, terrific, Andrea, and we're coming to the end.